Good morning, everyone. We're running this webinar today. Given the recent changes in guidance, we'll go through a bit more of that in a moment. Thank you for attending. Just as a little bit of housekeeping before we go into the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A section, and we'll either answer those as we go along, or we will, if we don't manage to get to everything, we will then send a document out to everyone with the answers as we go, once we've finished the webinar. So once again, thanks for joining us. The webinar is going to cover some of the background, what has changed, what you have to do and how it will work, and whether this is better for creditors. There have been some questions on that as well. And actually, one of the questions we've been asked by a number of people also is could there be a retrospective impact? Before we go into the presentation, however, I've not met everyone here. Just want to do brief introductions. So my name's Nick George Ellis, as you can see from the slide. I'm the Managing Director here at Just. He's previously been the roles in the collections and recoveries space for a long time, having worked at organisations like TDX Group, Equifax, Capital One, Alliance and Leicester. I'm an analyst and accountant by background, but I hope you won't hold that against me. I'll pass over to Vic, who can give a brief intro before we go into the rest of the slides.
Thanks, Nick. Good morning, everyone. I'm Vic Oliver. I joined Just a year ago, and my background is 20 years in debt recovery and collections, working for DCAs, litigators, debt purchasers, and latterly for panel management firm Wellco. I've worked with utility companies, government, financial services, and retail, and mainly helping not only on collection recoveries, but supporting clients in terms of strategy and how best to get that net collections return. Welcome to our webinar.
Thanks, Vic. So I'll get started firstly with a bit of background. So VAT on High Court enforcement fees has been a contentious issue for some time. Way back in October 2019, there were questions raised at the Houses of Parliament on this actual subject. Now, the legislation and fees on the charging of VAT is consistent across the enforcement sector, albeit the actual fees charged are slightly different, and there's different stages depending on whether it's civil or high court or county court. That said, the two biggest sectors, the two sectors, civil and high court, have charged VAT in very different ways. With civil enforcement, the VAT has always been charged to the creditor, who in most instances can claim the VAT back. But commonly in high courts, VAT has been charged to the debtor, increasing the fees to the debtor. So currently there's a case going through the High Court, and HMRC and the MOJ are looking at drafting new guidance on VAT and how it must be applied to enforcement fees. We are one of the few companies that have never charged VAT on enforcement fees to customers and debtors, and followed really the good practice that civil enforcement sector has been doing. So what has actually changed was back on the 7th of June, prompted by the court case and what was the discussions that were going on VAT. The High Court Office Association released new guidance on how organisations should treat that, and particularly highlighted here where the thing that was changed, which is they were drawing out on VAT registered organisations. So where it's VAT registered, they were advising their members to make sure that no VAT was charged to the debtor, and that the VAT invoice should be issued to the creditor, who in the instances where they're VAT registered, they can obviously claim that. So, and they instructed VAT charge for most users of High Court enforcement will change on the 1st of August. Where it's not non-VAT registered, the guidance has stayed the same, and we believe that will be subject to conversation and outcome from the new changes in MOJ and HMRC guidance and the case. But at the current stage, the only guidance that changed from the High Court Officers Association is for VAT registered creditors. I'll now pass over to Vic to talk you through at a very high level what's changed.
Thanks, Nick. I suppose for those who are attending today, just to let you know, there is a Q&A button to your right. So we'll take questions at the end. So feel free to ask us any questions and we'll get round to those. So what do you have to do and how will this work? Well, hopefully this is quite simple for both you and your suppliers, and that their systems are set up to change and invoice you to apply VAT. So what you should be doing right now is check how your providers, suppliers are currently applying VAT, whether they are charging that as part of their invoicing process, or whether they have that switched off currently. And if they haven't, then they need to start thinking about how they're moving to the new guidance, and also notifying you when they plan to transition. You'll need to agree with them how you remit the processes with your suppliers and for future payments. So they could remit the debt, less the VAT to you, or they could remit the debt and get paid separately for the VAT on the fees. Either way, the supplier needs to raise that and present you with an invoice. And again, hopefully their systems are set up to be able to do that relatively easily. And again, your systems internally are able to deal with those invoices that attract VAT. You'll need to make sure your accounts departments are ready to expect them in the future. So just 2 points, I think, from me. So point 2, hopefully your contracts and terms and conditions with your current suppliers cover all of point 2. I suppose my question to you guys are your suppliers ready, given the guidance from the HCEOA's guidance is 1st of August, which is now only 2 weeks away. Okay, moving on. So what do they have to do and how this works? So what we're showing you here is how it currently works, and then what happens under the new guidance. So the customer pays their debt with the fees, which is the £75 fee and the £190 fee, enforcement fee. And they also currently pay the £53 VAT on what would be a £1,000 debt. Under the new guidance, this would not be charged to the customer or debtor going forward. The agency would pay the VAT charge to the creditor to HMRC under new guidance. The creditor receives the £1,000, pays the VAT to the agency, and then reclaims it as part of their VAT return. And under the new guidance, and if you'll see here in this example, previously HMRC would receive that £53. Under the new guidance, HMRC wouldn't receive any of that return. So how is this better for you and your customers? So the customer pays less, they no longer pay that VAT amount. And that means that they are able to, where they would have paid that £53, they're able to apply that towards their principal balance, and they're able to apply that towards the fees that they have incurred as a result of the High Court enforcement. And what that means is that as a creditor, you are able to get that money or your principal balance back earlier. And to my point, customers can then afford to pay more of their debts back. I suppose the final point for me on here is there should be little admin for you as the creditor other than the change and how you process the invoice from your supplier. Your supplier should have systems that are built to be able to add the VAT to the invoice that comes to you. And finally, HMRC are not making money from those that are actually in debt. They are able to pay their debt down. Over to you, Nick. You may be on mute, Nick.
Thank you. That's not unusual for me. I apologise for that. Switch my camera on, but not the microphone. We've got one question through that has asked whether what's changed for non-VAT registered creditors. And at the moment, there's no change in the guidance for non-VAT registered creditors. So organisations may be treating that differently. We still believe that the debtor should not pay any VAT. Therefore, we do still raise a VAT invoice to the creditor. I think, as you can see from the guidance from the High Court Enforcement Officers Association, a sum often equivalent to the sum the VAT is added on to some debtors there. So there's a little bit of still a question outstanding that I think will be cleared up with future guidance coming out and post the case. I've got another one. Is it correct that only applies to customers who are VAT registered? The guidance, we believe that the rules should be that the debtor never pays any VAT. That's how we've been treating it. That's how CBIA treat it. So we're always not applying the VAT to the debtor. There is still some ambiguity in the rules, the guidance there, the height fraud that some organisations are still charging VAT to the creditor in the instance where they're not VAT registered. I'll go on to the last slide and then come back to some of the other questions. I can see there's a few coming there. So the final slide and the final question that we had from a number of people was could there be a retrospective impact there? And I think this is the bit where as we look through this, and it is only the guidance that has changed and the rules have not changed, I think it would be difficult to argue that VAT had not been charged incorrectly to the debtor or customer previously. We believe it seems logical in these circumstances, a debtor may very well have a claim for incorrect charging of VAT. So it may be something that people here would want to go and seek their advice on who would be liable and what would happen in those instances. But just to give some comfort out there, which is we've spoken to a number of creditors that were already looking at this and had sought guidance, and the assurances that they had been given is that it's the organisation that incorrectly charged the VAT that are liable. So in this case, it wouldn't be the energy company or the utility company. It would be the enforcement company that would have to correct the situation. Now over to any questions. I've got one more that we've not answered here, which is there a case for this activity to be zero rated? I think absolutely that's something that we at Just would support. I think in the case of VAT registered, it's fairly easy. All it is doing is changing the debtor's not getting VAT, but no one else in the supply chain has to cover that. I think the reason it should be, or we would support zero rated, is where a creditor is not VAT registered, then someone's got to bear the cost of that. And there's an argument, either the debtor bears the cost or the creditor bears the cost. So that's a burden that one of those two has to bear. And I'm not going to sit and argue that the case of where it should be. We apply it in the case of not to the debtor. But if it was zero rated, then I think that would be easier and fairer for all. Any other questions before I actually let me pass over to Vic? Vic, any last comments from you before we give everyone a chance to ask any other questions?
No, I think probably just on the last point, being that we would absolutely support that, the zero rated VAT, but I think that it needs to be fair to the customers and the creditors. I think it most certainly has got to be quick and easy to introduce, and it needs to have met UK's government's public commitment of not charging VAT to debtors or customers, whatever you choose to call them. I think that's probably my final point on that one.
Okay, thanks, Vic. We've just had another question in. Would our choice of provider have a negative impact on us if they have been charging VAT incorrectly? So, as we say on the last part of the presentation, it is the organisation that has been charging the VAT incorrectly that would be liable for that. So in the respects of a financial impact, then it wouldn't have an impact. It may well have a bit of an operational impact if debtors in the first instance start contacting your organisation, but the liability for the VAT shouldn't have a negative impact given the guidance that we've seen other organisations getting. When will the matter be finalised with the MOJ, and can you expect much to change? That's something that I think anyone that's been in this industry. I've only been in this part of the sector for 18 months. It's been something that we've been expecting clarity on within those 18 months. I think the court case will give some conclusion, and that should be concluded. I would anticipate in Q3 this year. I would anticipate that hopefully MOJ HMRC would come out with something in a similar sort of time frame, but I'm not going to predict how quickly they will respond given the experience I've seen to date. Can you expect much to change? I would anticipate we can see where the lay of the land is going on the VAT registered with the changing guidance from HCEOA. I think the interesting place will be to look at the guidance on what should be done with non-VAT registered organisations. Well, thanks for all of your questions. If you've got any further questions or any comments, please do contact us. It's at info.justdebt.co.uk. It's been great to have the questions that we've had. If there's nothing else, I think we can wrap this session up and give you all some time back. Thanks very much.
Thanks for attending.